you're talking about working with the corporate clients and how it differed and the people and how all that worked. And we certainly didn't have client with an art department, but we did have clients that had other agencies that they were using, and for example, Nestle, they did the Butterfinger thing over here. I worked for Nestle for 30 years, and I started out a guy who we first called on. I had a sales guy that worked for Pacific Eye and Ear, and his wife made jewelry. She made these safety pin bracelets on elastic that could stretch and stuff. Anyway, she met this woman at a show that they were selling all that kind of stuff. And this woman, they started talking, and what do you do? Oh, I work for Nestle. What do you do? Well, my husband works for an ad agency. Oh, really? Well, you should have him call on me. And at that time, we're in LA, and Nestle's headquarters, not the main headquarters in Switzerland, but the North America headquarters was in Glendale. So she said, well, have your husband call on me, So we got a chance to call on Nestle, and we made the appointment, and then it was like a couple-week wait, and they're in the 18 stories building, and they have every floor, and it's just like going to the Wizard of Oz, and you see this big grandiose thing, and you're these little guys, and so we met with. She had left. She went to a different division, and the guy that took her place agreed to see us. Okay, and he was in charge of the Contadina pastas and sauces. That was one of their brands, and they were doing a Chicago marathon. They were a sponsor. They would do this big spaghetti feed at the end of right before the night before the race, and I should have put some of those pieces up. Maybe that'll happen in another show, but. We had a chance to. He really liked the fact that we had done all the record stuff. He was very straight. This guy looked like a narc. Okay, he was straight looking. Intimidating just to look at him. He was that straight looking. But what we didn't know was at night when he went home, he would take off the suit, put on his headband, plug in his lava lamp, and light up his bong and listen to the Grateful Dead. He was a huge Deadhead freak, right? But during the day, it was like Superman, Clark Kent, and Superman. And we didn't know that. We come to find that out later on in the relationship. But he really loved our work, and he gave us the Chicago Marathon to do for Contadina pastas and sauces. So we did all this great stuff. It did really, really well, and he was really happy. And he was leaving that division, the pastas and sauces, and going to acquisitions, where Nestle would buy other companies and fold them into their portfolio of food products. And it's an amazing company. It's the largest food company in the world. When you go into a major grocery store, they own about 3,000 SKUs in that store, all under different Bosch and Lomb, all these different waters, and it's amazing. It's an amazing company. And so the guy that took his place was in charge of doing something for Butterfinger because they were losing market share. They were like a 30 million, well, no, they were more than that, but they were a sleepy brand. Butterfinger had been around forever. They weren't competing with Hershey. They weren't doing any of that. And they had used Bart Simpson, and that really spiked the brand. Butterfinger, he became the spokesperson for Butterfinger, Bart Simpson, because the guy that was the brand manager before our guy knew the guy that created The Simpsons. And they were on the Tracy Ullman show. They were little bumper spots on the Tracy Ullman show, The Simpsons. And so he cut a deal with the guy that created The Simpsons to have Bart Simpson be the spokesperson for Butterfinger. And that took off like crazy. I mean, he was just huge. And there was this meeting, I guess, about 6 months later after he started being the spokesperson, where there was this controversy about in corporate that Bart Simpson was an underachiever and not represented well for the Nestle brand of products because they were higher end, sophisticated quality control. And this kid was an underachiever and just not representational of their company at all. So they were talking about getting rid of him, right? And until the CFO showed this guy the profit that they were making on Bart Simpson being a spokesperson. So they forgot about what they stood for and went for the money. Okay. At the end of the contract that this original brand manager had signed, he moved on and my guy took over the brand. And as soon as they got rid of Bart Simpson, the Simpson people wanted to negotiate a new deal. Nestle didn't feel that they needed it. Okay, they didn't need Bart Simpson. The brand was already doing great. It was like moved up like 20, 30 spots. It was right up there with Hershey, major competitor. And so they didn't think that they needed it. And Bart Simpson people wanted more money, and it just didn't happen. So they got rid of it, and the brand started declining. And that's when my guy took it over. And he said, we got to come up with something that's going to really sort of make it, it's got to be known, it's got to be out there, it's got to talk to these young consumers. We need something. So I came up with this idea that during spring break, MTV was huge. Now this goes back, I don't know, 20 years. Bart Simpson had left, the brand was declining, but they needed an idea. How do we reach all these young people? We don't have a huge budget. So I was a big MTV fan because of all the videos and stuff and the music part of it. And so I came up with this idea to do a t-shirt, do a logo called Give 'em the Finger, Butterfinger, right? It. Which was because in those days, punk was really coming in. And when you go to a concert, I had a tenant who had a young son, and he didn't want to go to these concerts. He's at the Whiskey and places like that. This kid was like 14 or 15, wanted to go to these concerts, and the father didn't want to go. So I went with him. And it was amazing because, these bands would come out and everybody would be like, hey, when I was younger, this meant let's go outside and square off and I'm going to knock your block off. Now it meant, hey, man, we love you guys. You guys are awesome. You're the bomb. This was a whole different meaning. And so I came up with this idea of Give 'em the Finger, Butterfinger. And my guy loved it. But when he showed it to corporate, they freaked out. They said, no, we can't do that. Because the idea was to go to Florida where spring break was and MTV was covering it and everybody's watching. We're going to give the shirts out for free and have all these people, with Give 'em the Finger, Butterfinger on television. It was a great idea and free publicity. All we had to do was, a couple thousand shirts and just give them out free. And the kids are going to wear them. It's got a great attitude. It's this. And that's what they're into. And corporate freaked out. But we did do, I think, 60 shirts, and they all went to the executives, but they never did.
So it was too controversial for them.
It still is. It still is. They tried Follow the Finger. They did a campaign where you would follow this animated finger, and it would take you to these, different experiences and stuff. And then nobody better lay a finger on my Butterfinger. And, they've done everything but Give 'em the Finger, Butterfinger, because it's too controversial, and it definitely freaks them out. But that's what we needed. That's what they needed to really get some. I mean, it would have been free publicity, and it would have been all over TV. I mean, that was MTV. That was the mentality, and that's who they were trying to hit. But that
was the perfect target audience for them to hit.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It was, and spring break in Florida, televised on MTV, all over MTV. It was, and you got to remember, MTV was the hot thing. There wasn't a whole lot of competition. They were the place. Now it's all different. They got into reality shows and all that. It's a whole different thing. But they ended up finding out that they needed to bring that music piece back because that was really their audience. Nobody gave a shit about the reality shows.
Yeah.
Didn't really do that well. That wasn't who they were. So, there was that. Then there's a few other things here. We have the Hub logo, which was a project that I did for Coca Cola. They have their own zip code, Coca Cola. That's how big they are in Atlanta. It was huge. And one of the guys that I worked with at Nestle, that was one of the cool things about corporate. It was a lot like record business where as Alice got more and more popular, he took us with him. And the fact that we were doing stuff and his manager would direct people to us, he would direct people to us. You got to talk to the Pacific guy in here. You need an album cover. Those are the guys you talk to. So we got a lot of business like this. The guy that turned out to be the brand manager at Coca Cola was a guy that I had worked with at Nestle. He left Nestle and went to Coca Cola, brought us with him, and they wanted to do, and this is probably, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago. They wanted to do they had these areas in shopping malls and in a couple of airports where people could go. It was like a Coca-Cola area, had all this signage. You felt like you were in a Coca-Cola commercial, and it was bright and all that stuff. And they would let you charge your phones, and sort of get on the internet and stuff. And it was really limited. It wasn't very inviting. So they hired us to, and I should have put more images of it in there, but this was it was called the Hub, and it connecting you to the world. And what it became was this experience. There were big screens with projections on them. People would submit videos, and if they were cool enough, we would put them up in these centers. It was an experience, an entire physical experience that was in a pretty good size shape. We actually built one. They built one in St. Louis or someplace, but then the whole industry and the economy kind of hit the dumper at that time, and they stopped building them. But they did build one. It's funny like that. Not very many things last a long time. They kind of come and go. I mean, that's one of the great things about working with Alice and Black Oak, Arkansas, and some of these other companies. I worked for Nestle for 30 years. That's a long time. I was the smallest agency on their authorized vendor list of agencies. And the big agencies hated us because we were taking work away from them, because they would push what they knew the client would buy. They didn't want to do anything extra. They didn't want to do anything out of the box. And these marketing people were looking for that. They were looking for this disruptive, out of the box thinking. So we became very competitive. In fact, at one point we rented an office space at about a half a block from their headquarters in Glendale. And my partner and I would make bets on who could walk through the building and come out the other side with the most work. Because that's what we do. We just go to each one of the floors, and they had 6 divisions there, and we were doing work for 5 of the 6. And so, we'd come back with 4 and 5 projects at a time, and we do that pretty much 2 or 3 times a week because we were right there. And then the clients would come over. We rented this building. It was built by Frank Lloyd Wright Jr. It was a pyramid, and we rented it. It was just about a half a block from their office headquarters in Glendale. It was great. I mean, it was a lot of fun, and it was like the record business in the fact that they wanted something different, but it was unlike the record business where they had marketing people and branding people and all these people that wanted to be able to add their 2 cents to it, to be able to say, see that, I did that. I did that. There was a lot of that because they were all marketing people. They didn't have any art people. They were buying all that outside. I think there were 14 of us, 14 agencies. And we were the smallest. There were big agencies like McCann Erickson, Neil Burnett, Shia Day, and we were, taking work away from them, which was great. I loved doing that. Loved being the sugar in their gas tank. So you see down here this race car. Mm-hmm. That we did for Alltech Lansing. The girl that's standing next to the car is Cindy Wood. She was Playmate of the Year in 1976. And she was, if you remember, in Apocalypse Now, when the helicopter lands and these girls get out in the cowboy outfits with the guns. So that race car that you see there, we designed that with all these spoilers and stuff. And you got to remember, there was no Porsches that looked like that. We designed it all, and they actually made it. And we built that because the guy who was the assistant marketing guy who turned us on, we had met him through a Black Oak, Arkansas thing that endorsed it. He was working for a kickbox company for guitar players, and they were doing an endorsement with Black Oak, Arkansas. And they said, yeah, we'll do the endorsement. You got to deal with our agency. So right here, turned out that this guy that we dealt with, Rich Mandela, was one of the first roadies that the Rolling Stones used when they came to America for the first time. And he knew all of them. And when he called on us at Pacific Pioneer, it was like, oh my God, you're the guy that did Rolling Stones song. I was their first roadie. So we hit it off really well. And we did a poster called The Speed of Sound. It was with Cindy. And then when we'd go to shows and we went to the IMSA series, we would bring out big speakers and play rock and roll and have that car there with Cindy and other girls like my wife, Bonnie, and some other girls that were wives of the guys. And they'd dress up in these jumpsuits. We created jumpsuits and posters and everything for this. And we never raced the car because we didn't have enough money to put an engine in it. It just looked really good, but it never ran. But it didn't matter because we were stealing. Camel was the sponsor for the IMSA series. They would end up bringing their girl and their car over to our area because we'd have hundreds of people standing around getting posters, waiting for these girls to sign them and looking at the car. I mean, it was really unique, even though we never raced it. It was really crazy. But again, being disruptive, we only had enough money to make it look good. And the last thing we've got to look at over here is I went to work with one of the guys that was at Nestle, went over to InBev, which is the largest beer company. They own everything, Specs, Stella Artois, 29 beer brands.
They
And
bought
we were,
Budweiser in the last few years, didn't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they bought part of it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, they own everybody. I mean, it's really amazing. And well, I was working with them for 3 years before they sold it to the Brazilians. The Brazilians bought it, and I think they sold it again. But the people in Belgium, the Belgians owned it when we were working there. And the guy that I'd worked with at Nestle, they took me to Kmart. Then he took me here, and we did all the promotions for Beck's and Bass and Stella Artois. And, it was a great account. And we worked for them for 3 years. And then again, like everything else, you build up this brand, they think they can handle it. So they get rid of it. They got rid of everybody. They fired him. They fired us. It was all just this big political setup too, the way it all came down, but again, nothing lasts forever. And, it's a hard thing to accept because you think if you can build something on friendship, you can build something that's really good, that it would just keep on going, but it doesn't. It just never does. No matter how good it is, there'll always be somebody that comes in and wants to change it or bring their own people in or whatever.
Yeah, politics seem to take.
Yeah, politics is huge, especially in everything. It's politics is big.
Politics and personalities,
egos. I mean, it was it's a crazy business, the creative business. I mean, I never thought that I would ever make a career out of doing this. I never did. I mean, I always loved art, but I never realized that somebody would pay me money to sit and do it. I mean, a lot of people were just like, well, you get to sit around and color things and draw and stuff all day. That's not working, And I'm like, okay, yeah, here's a pen and paper. You do it. Right. Well, no, that's why we're coming to you. Well, okay, then respect the fact that, when I do something, there's 53 years of experience that goes into what I do. I just don't pull it out of my, my left ear. It has 53 years worth of education that goes into what I end up doing. And, it's interesting to see how people react to that. Some people understand it, respect it. Other people go, well, I can get this guy over here is $20 cheaper. Okay, go over there. Go over there. It's fine. I don't need it. If you want to give, I just went through a thing like that with these guys that had a movie they did. It's an indie movie, and it's pretty good. I mean, after you watch it, you want to kill yourself. But other than that, it's okay. It's a real depressing film, and with a happy ending. It's like right as you've decided to jump off the building and you're in mid-flight, they decide to make it an uplifting thing, but it's too late. You're going to hit the ground. It's done. You've committed, and so they wanted it for a very cheap price. They asked us how much we wanted. I'll do it for $10,000. Okay. And that's cheap when it comes to movie posters. I mean, most movie posters are $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. Even indie films. A kid that used to work for me owns BLT, the largest movie poster design company in the country. And they charge anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 for a poster. But it's minimal compared to the money they spend on making a movie. You spend $30 million making a movie, $100,000. Yeah, because they get the poster, they get the campaign, they get everything. So when I told this guy 10, he said, well, I was sort of hoping you'd do it for 5. And I said, well, you can keep on hoping, but the least I can do is for 8. Oh yeah, okay. And he had me talk to the girl that's financing it. And it was, like, yeah, sure, okay. And then I never heard from him again. And then she just called me up the other day and said, well, if you can do it for 6. I said, I can barely do it for 8. There's no way. Go to the other people. I know he's looking for other people. He's found somebody. Go to them. I just can't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't care, because when you do those kinds of things, you end up eating it in the long run. That kind of a piece of business ends up being like, okay, look, I'll do whatever you need me to do. Just, I want to get this over with. I want to get whatever money I can get, and you go your way and I go my way before we start hating each other. And now I'll get into that before I even get started. I mean, I've been doing this so long that as soon as they say the wrong word, that's all it takes, one word. And it's usually like, man, we're going to have so much fun. We're going to have so much fun doing this. And what they're really saying is, we're going to have so much fun taking advantage of you. You don't even know what hit you. That's what they mean.
And you're in a great position now, Ernie, that you can
Yeah.
pick and choose and take what you want.
Yeah, I'm very blessed. I really am. I mean, my wife, thank God for her. She's a business part of this, and she made the right investments, and she did it all. I mean, if it wasn't for her, I'd be living in a cardboard box. Seriously. I mean, I just give everything away, and it's taken me years. First of all, it's taken me years to believe that I'm really good. Okay, and as a creative person, no matter what you do, you always have this fear of not being good. There's somebody that's out there, and it's like being a gunslinger in the old west. You could be the fastest guy ever, but there's always going to be one. There's always going to be a young one that comes up and is going to be able to be faster than you, just a hair second faster.
Now, Ernie, through this series, we've talked a lot about the things you've done over the career. And one of the things we ask when we're doing a music podcast and with our guests, we'll ask them if they had any advice for young people coming into the industry or someone starting new. I have an idea of what you'd say. Along the way, we've talked about disruption. We've talked about, take chances, go the extra mile, marry the right person,
Make friends with the right person.
Right, exactly. Timing, you've mentioned timing.
Timing is huge.
What's another piece of advice outside of what we've just mentioned that you'd offer someone and say, this is really sage advice that I would follow?
You can't even tell them to be a doctor anymore because they're so frustrated with corporate America running everything. So that's out. I've been asked that question before. It's a good question. What I would suggest is take some business classes. Take some business classes. Take a basic law class. Okay, it's important that you know what rights you have when you create stuff, because just because you create it don't mean you own it, and that happens a lot. That's happened to me. Where I've created it, other people take it and use it, and I have no recourse because I don't own it. A record company owns it, or this or that. Luckily, I was able to. My partner Tony was smart at that. We made stickers that said this artwork is exclusive property of some guy here. Otherwise, the record companies were taking it, like we talked about. Different art directors would take it, and get taken advantage of a lot. I was lucky in my collection because the pieces I have, because everybody was work for hire, so I own it all. But I would definitely take legal class, understand what rights you have as a creative person. You can do that at a junior college. You don't have to go to Stanford or anything like that, but you should have that knowledge. They don't teach you that in art school. I spent 5 years in art school. Nobody's ever asked me for my degree. I got a BFA, graduated top of my class. Nobody's ever asked me. You know what they say? Here's a pencil and paper. There's a desk. Sit down and tell us what you do if this was the problem. Give us a solution. I don't care about your degree. I don't care about your portfolio, because I don't know how long it took you to do that. It's really great, but it could have taken you much longer than I have a budget to afford. Right. So tell me what you would do and make it relevant. And that's always it's been my case. It's like timing. It's always been, okay. And the portfolio helped a bit because it got me in the door, but it didn't get me the job. What got me the job was the solution that I could provide. Okay. And then later on, the knowledge that I would have about what I created came harder because it cost dearly. A couple of major lawsuits that, thank God, I had the best attorney in the state of California that I won. But it's still, there's certain things that I just can't do because it could be. And it hasn't, knock on wood, up to this point, ever been an issue, but it could be. And, there's so many. The law was great up until 1976 for creative people. Then they changed it. And now it sucks. It really sucks. So, and especially if you're a freelancer, it's different if you're doing it for yourself or you have a company that people are doing it with you, like I did. I had 5 illustrators full time. So all that work that was created was owned by Pacific Pioneer, which I owned because I owned the company. So it was all work for hire. Had any of it been freelance, I wouldn't own it. And it's still kind of questionable about every album cover I ever did had a copyright line on, from the record company. So that means, what do they own? Do they own the music? Do they own, no, the musicians own the music. Do they own the artwork? Oh, that's kind of questionable because it does have a copyright on that piece of art that we created and provided. So, I mean, it's kind of iffy. Luckily, you know, I don't think record companies are looking at me. I'm kind of low hanging fruit, and I have artwork. So my main thing is, yeah, I can sell some prints, but I really want to sell the artwork. The artwork is where the money is. You know, I mean, and the fact that when we did it originally, it was $3,500, and now it's worth 150,000. That's, you know, that's retribution for all those years. You know, and luckily I have, you know, a couple of people that appreciate it and want it. So good position. Yeah, so legal advice is definitely critical. You know, even if you don't take a business class, you know, you're going to go to work for somebody, you should know what your rights are. You should know what you create. If you're a freelancer, you own it. If you work for them, it's work for hire, you don't own it. So it's important. It's important to know that. I hope that answered. Did that answer?
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer to
Yeah, protect your industry, protect your creativity, and
yeah, because creative everybody needs the idea. Without the idea, all they have, you know, or the look and feel, all they have is something that needs to be sold to other people. It needs to be branded, it needs to be packaged, it needs to be messaged. They can't do that. They created the product. So they come to us, and then all of a sudden they own all of it. You know, well, wait a minute, how did that happen? Well, we paid you, you know, and you were freelancer. We own it. It's our brand. It's our product. We paid you. You took the money, and then you're screwed, you know. So, you know, I wish that, you know, and it's so funny because there isn't one art school in the country that has legal classes.
It sounds like it should be a major.
Yeah, mandatory. It should be a mandatory class that you need to take as a creative person, whether you're a sculptor, an illustrator, a designer, whatever, a jeweler. You need to know that stuff, and they don't teach it. They just don't teach it.
And unfortunately, some of these people might just find out the hard way. You know,
I did.
They'll do something.
I found out the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah. My first event, my first learning experience cost $33,000.
It's a very expensive lesson.
Yeah. Well, it got me off cheap because they were suing me for $325,000. And they didn't do anything except create a bunch of stuff illegally. So, I mean, it was a long story, but, you know, in the end, my attorney wrote 3 letters. They dropped everything, surrendered $50,000 worth of merchandise that they had created illegally, and they surrendered $40,000 worth of framing and matting that they had done. And, you know, tried to steal some pieces. It was gnarly, you know, and all he did was write 2 letters, and they dropped everything and gave me all the stuff. And, you know, that's the kind of attorney you need. He's $1,100 an hour, but, you know, it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it, you know, and I learned the hard way. You know, luckily, all that they were so sure that they were going to win the lawsuit because we had a contract and they were limited to what they could do, but they were so sure that they were going to win that they listed everything that they had created illegally to justify the $325,000 total amount. So when they lost, they had already, you know, I had no idea, okay, that they had done that. And when it was listed, it was like, wait a minute, they can't do that. They didn't have the rights to do that. And so, but they were sure that I didn't own the rights. I owned the piece. They knew that, but there's a difference between owning the piece and owning the rights. Mm-hmm. What they didn't know was that it was all work for hire, so I own all the rights as well. So that my attorney wrote, like I said, a couple letters, and 33 grand, and you know, I ended up selling most of the stuff and make the money back. So it wasn't a bad experience, but it took a toll physically. It took a toll mentally and physically to be involved in a lawsuit like that. Right. It took 2 years. You know, it was just nuts. It was nuts, and a lot of stress and pressure that you don't need. So take some law classes. You can get them easy. You can go, you know, City College. They don't charge you. You can get a couple of basic law classes so you know what you have, what your rights are. And as a creative, that I give that advice to whoever asked me that. And I have been asked that. I mean, it's an important question to ask and an important answer to understand.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, that's pretty much it.
Well,
Yeah,
I,
that's
I
great
like the
advice.
conversation today. I like the content, everything that you've
Well, I
discussed.
like you guys.
There was some new stuff that you brought in today that we had not seen or heard. So great stuff.
Still a whole bunch more stuff to talk about.
And that's what
I'm
we
sure.
want.
I'm
Yeah.
sure. We're really getting under the covers with Ernie Cefalu.
Yeah, man, I'm ready. I'm nice and toasty under here. I like being nice and toasty.